What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Austin with Devve, and welcome to the show. And we have got a doozy for you today, my friends. I know you've heard me talking about Taunt Network in the Devve official Telegram. Well, we're sitting here with Jeff from Taunt Network, and we're joined by a special guest today, Mr. Bart Barden. See, this is why we don't do live streams, is because I get people's names wrong. Bart from Super Streaming. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. How are you guys doing?
Great. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely awesome to have you. And you know what? The beauty on the screen just improved so much with Davin making it here. Davin, how are you, buddy?
Hi, guys.
How's your internet? Your internet streaming? How's it look in the top left-hand corner?
Yeah, look, if I go Apache and drag this down, I'm going to bow out, guys. We've got terrible internet over here, so apologies. Great to see you, Bart and Jeff. Really good to
see
be
you,
here, guys.
Good deal. And we've got 55 people watching right now. If you're watching from one of the various YouTube streams, do me a favor, put hashtag Taunt, hashtag TAUNT into the chat here, and we're gonna be picking at the end for a Mythical Warrior NFT and also a Genesis Skull Pass. So why don't we start with some introductions? Let's start with you, Jeff, and we'll just round robin.
Yeah. So I'm Jeff from the Taunt Network. I think this is my second one I've done with the Devve community. First one with Austin. High energy, as Austin said prior to this, which we love. Yeah, so for me, like my vision and what we're trying to do with the Taunt Network is all around tokenized engagement. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in the realm of GameFi, Gamblefy, and live streaming. And we're really looking forward to partnering with Devve now and in the future around really getting a lot of our products and vision out there through the blockchain.
Wonderful, Jeff. Wonderful. Bart, over to you. So you actually have a long history in esports betting. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. And again, super streaming, just real quick, is definitely is something to supercharge exactly what Taunt and Devve are trying to do. Right. We're like pour the gasoline on what you're trying to do in terms of powering engagement. And what we say is making the fans super fans, right? A lot with live streaming. My background, it's very interesting. Known Jeff for a while. We always went back and thought that what was going to be the next wave of engagement and fandom, right? From NFL, soccer, back in the days of horse racing for betting. All these people were engaging in various activities, and Jeff and I always thought, look, gaming as an underpinning core was always going to be that next level of engagement, and obviously with Web3 enablement and all that, it's shown to be the case. So what I just did is I tried to say, hey, there's going to be more eyeballs on gaming, on places where people are consuming gaming, live streams, Twitch, YouTube, and how can I in effect create a platform that can reach those users and bring wonderful content and platforms kind of to that audience, which is why Jeff and I are simpatico that way.
So real quick before we kick over to Davin, can we dig a little bit deeper into super streaming just a little bit? Like, what was the genesis of it? What's the reason for your pivot? Because you do have a pretty long history in this industry with some pretty prominent roles, and so obviously there's something behind this.
Yeah, the origination of super streaming was basically an R&D project when I was working for Paddy Power Betfair. Okay, back out. So I'm in Dublin, Ireland, before the gold rush that they say of betting in the US. We were looking at, what is going to be the next level of fan, right? Who's going to be watching what? And what we found in various studies was, people were watching less and less broadcast TV. Over here, it was the Premier League, right? Soccer. And what it was being replaced with, number one answer, 47% less broadcast consumption between 18 and 35-year-olds. What it was being replaced with? Gaming. Watching gaming on YouTube, watching gaming on Twitch. So I was working with my compadres at the time there. We're like, let's build an experience to reach that person. They consume content media differently than the older better, right? And super streaming was born out of, let's bring at the time, a betting experience where that type of audience is engaging, which was right on stream, right? Or in stream, and make that engagement valuable, right? The most engaged users are a potential betting user, right? Back in the day. Fast forward to now, the impetus has now been, hey, that's great. But what we just found was there's a better way to make it more broad, right? We were very, very narrowed on wagering, which has its own licensing problems and regulation problems, and it can be less ubiquitous. But what we found people loved about our product, or what super streaming was they could kind of consume us anywhere. So then we said, right, let's start partnering and being a tool that could be used at a platform level to reach people who love consuming this type of content, whether that's gaming or streaming. And that's what we brought the product to do. So we broadened it, actually, which most people sometimes narrow it over time. We ended up being too narrow, but the use cases were really well. So we started to broaden our use cases.
Man, oh man. So definitely looks like Davin might be having some internet issues here. And if he comes back, we'll do some intros. But so this is great. And I don't want to get too excited down this path yet, because I have like a little track I want to take us on. But so let's kick over to something. Let's assume, there's a big problem in this particular industry. What is the problem that Taunt and or super streaming are working together to like solve? What is it really?
You want me to go first, Bart? I'm sure we're going to end up.
You lead up.
Yeah. So I think for us and how we look at it, and again, we're looking at more from the game developer perspective that leads kind of into what Bart was talking about more on the wagering side, is just the monetization issues. So when you start to look at like how a game developer makes money, the games business is on its own. I think everybody understands like this year has been relatively tough, right, for the games industry, lots of layoffs and things like that. It's a content, hit driven business in general. You got a lot of competition, not just from other games, but also just other entertainment forms like, TV, Netflix, movies, music, all of those things. So you're just competing for eyeballs. And so when you start to look at how a game developer makes money, in some of these models that are out there, traditional game models right now, free to play, PC, you just buy titles, right? Things like that. You need a lot of people doing that, to kind of win over time. And the strategic advantage really lies into like the larger publishers, like the EAs and and the Microsofts and the Activisions, because they have just such a innate built-in audience that's been built over 20 years, in some instances 25 years. And so they can market to those people. They don't have a ton of user acquisition costs. And then, when you start to look at the game developers, not only they have to spend the money on the build out, but they have to spend money on acquiring users and all of that. And all of a sudden, it's just like, okay, is that even a viable model, right? And so, even Bart and I's experience working in the traditional game experience for so many years, we've seen even hit games get, for whatever reason, just didn't work, right? You think this thing was going to go nuts, and it just doesn't hit. So think about if you're just an indie developer and this was your one bullet to try and make work, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't go off. So it's a really, really tough business. So then when you start to look at, okay, if you're a game developer and what are other ways I can monetize? Well, wagering is out there, like Bart was kind of talking about, where, at that point, it's not about necessarily getting a bunch of, users into the game and doing free to play in-app purchases. It's really about just content generation and getting distribution of that, that betting product, whatever that might be, out into the world, right? And so that's one piece. And then this live streaming portion as well. So other than gaming, live streaming is the biggest entertainment, vehicle in the world. So if you combine those two audiences, and you have these huge oceans you can kind of market to and dictate to. Game developers now have always traditionally used like live streaming and esports and things like that as a marketing vehicle for back into the game. So it's a cost center. It's not a revenue generation piece. So that makes it really, really tough for like content creators. Ultimately, back in our days, me and Bart were also building esports leagues, like really tough business model to kind of make work if a developer holds the IP there, right? They have to sign off on rights and things like that. And you start to, as a content creator, you're like, oh shoot, well, if I get too big, they're gonna want their piece of the pie, or they can just call it, right? They can just say, hey, I don't want you guys doing this anymore because they own the IP, right? And so that's a really, really tough position to be in for the whole ecosystem. Everything's fractured, right across the board. There's different priorities for everybody, but I think, you know, what we're doing at Taunt and what we're trying to do is kind of combine those worlds together at the game design level. So basically, hey, you know, if I'm making a game, I can actually see features or products from this game that actually enable, you know, content creators to make money, me to make money on some of this content that's being created after the game. So the live streams, maybe it's Gamblify, maybe it's wagering. But in essence, I'm thinking about that up front, and I'm not beholden to the traditional gaming models that have been around for a long time, and I have some diverse ways to make money.
So just go ahead, Mark, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it's just a great sorry, it's just a great segue, right? Because like where Jeff is, if you take the value chain, right? Jeff's focusing down toward the game publishers, right? And then for me, you can consider super streaming like a wedge almost, right? It's like, okay, Jeff brought up some good points. There's like indie developers and then there's EA, right? And both of them have their game content streamed out there in the world, right? And they're both not extracting the value from that content out there, right? A lot of people are streaming it. It's being consumed, millions of eyeballs. What are they making? 45% RPM on YouTube. That's it, right? And that's the streamer making it. That's not the publishers getting, in effect, none of that. Now, some of them have taken a real draconian approach, which is not good for the environment, for the ecosystem, which is, well, I'll just shut you down. It's my game. It's my rights. Call it more of the Blizzard World of Warcraft model, right? And then some just don't have the ability or budget or thought to then say, well, how can I get value from this whole ecosystem that's in effect distributing and promoting my content? Yes, it's free eyeballs, but they don't have a business model downstream to take advantage of it. So super streaming sits in between there and says, hey, while all these people are now streaming all your content everywhere live, there's some really cool monetization links that you can make for that content. Again, very nicely connected with what Taunt is doing, etc. So it's like that wedge, if you will, to try to, bridge that gap for all the, live content about your game that's just circulating around constantly.
So on that note, we've got 311 people watching this on the various forums that we're broadcasting it on. And by the way, I just want to repeat, #Taunt, put it in the comments for me. So I want to break this down because I know if the questions are going through my head, they're probably going through other people's heads. So I just want to simplify it just a little bit so that people can kind of get the whole view. So are we sitting on a platform or building out a platform whereby at the game development level, as somebody is developing a game, they can account for the live streaming that's going to take place, and it's actually built in at the game level so that the developer can share in the revenue that up until this point they've always lost out on, with exception of maybe the marketing value that they get from that? Am I kind of reading that the right way?
That's exactly it. So think about a world, and this is what we're kind of building, through the Taunt network, but think about a world where the data feed that's coming from the game specifically is going out with a live stream to content creators, to esports operators, to whoever wants that kind of the data feed. And within that data feed, then people can kind of create products that sit on top of that directly from the game. The cool part there is if you build a pipeline in, is then you have a tunnel, right? Live streaming can affect gameplay can affect live streaming. And that's in essence what we're trying to do with kind of what we're building at the Taunt network. The cool thing about all of this, and I think I talked a little bit about this at the last thing, is that the blockchain itself really is the conduit that can make that happen in the most optimal way. There isn't a way for us to actually do that, if we haven't had it centralized in a fashion that I think people would feel comfortable with. There is a Gamblify aspect to this around transparency and things like that. But the core piece of this tunnel of getting that data and the live stream content, all of those pieces, that allows any type of feature to be, kind of created at that point. So think about a world where a live stream goes out and the crowd can kind of vote. We're in Battle World, our game. The crowd can kind of vote on what arena they want to use, right? That will actually affect the game arena. And then when the arena comes on, it's the one the crowd voted on, right? Stuff like that is where you can start to do really cool things from once we have that pipeline. And then if you go even 2 steps further, think about trying to run that on Ethereum, right? With the pieces around how slow the blockchain is, that blockchain is specifically. Even if we were trying to run it on another L2, it'd be very, very difficult. And this is where kind of Devve comes in, and the 8 million transactions per second is when you start combining live streaming, authentication, transparency, reconciliation for gambling purposes, all of those things that need finality really, really quickly. There isn't really a great option out there other than Devve that can handle that if you want the blockchain pieces.
So along those lines, I want to ask you this question, Bart, because you had mentioned earlier super streaming is kind of the wedge, and I'm curious, like, what type of streaming audiences do you cater to? Like, what type of content does super streaming cater to? And can we go a little bit deeper into, like, how is super streaming the wedge here? What is this partnership really mean?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the great thing is we're content agnostic, right? Like, that's the beauty. Is our whole thing is we don't care if you're in the world today, in our live product right now, we don't care if you're a streamer streaming on YouTube or Twitch or Kick or your own website, right? Putting up a super streaming fun trivia game or putting up some shopping directly integrated to Shopify. You don't have to kind of mess with the OBS or mess with the SDK. You can push those kind of point of sale offers to the customer at the top of the funnel, basically, while it's being streamed without having to, care where it is, right? And so when I say it's the wedge, it's like, again, I don't care if you're 2 people playing Fortnite and there's, a couple people watching, but you know what? You have some maps that you want to surface and some map codes. Well, you can surface that in a nice, cool overlay. So while someone's watching your stream, you can surface those merchandising opportunities, if you will, whatever that might be, just right there, right? So again, I think it's that combination, right? It's like if the game publisher enables the hooks at the development level, let's say with the Taunt network, such that it makes it easier to build engaging and competitive content downstream, then a lot of the offerings that we have, like cool game shows and all of those things, are even more powerful, right? So again, to answer your question, we're content agnostic, right? We're platform agnostic. And we're really let someone, we'll build kind of engaging games and fun trivias or whatever it is related to whatever content that you have, right? And the more intelligent that your content is upstream, i.e. at the developer plugin level, the more monetized and convertible it is to transactions downstream when the users are actually consuming it.
Incredible. And I want to, forgive me, I want to smooth brain this for just a second because I tend to fall on that side of the bell curve on occasion. But so I used to shoot a show a while back, a weekly show, and we had this guy named Justin, who was one of my co-hosts, and he used to come on, and every time you could set your clock by it, he would use a word that forced me to go look in the dictionary because I did not understand what that word was. And the comments would flow, right? And it was almost gamified that we could guess that this guy was going to drop this word on every single stream or some word that we didn't understand. Now, if I could have turned that into some sort of monetization, are you telling me that this sort of platform could have made that exist? Like outside of the games? Who wants that one? Either one of you guys.
I mean, from super streaming's perspective, again, gaming content is what is primarily streamed today, right?
Got it.
So it is a very easy path for us to enable anyone tied to doing gamified content. And then to Jeff's point, the game developers are kind of in control of that content and how people consume it. From a super streaming perspective, hey, we've done cool events on, golf, right? 2v2 golf or traditional sports, or we're putting together something for the presidential debate where it's like, here's 20 fun questions about will Biden call Trump an idiot over the first 10 minutes of the election. But the cool thing, But the cool thing is it still has to be streamed. So I'll bring it back to Jeff so he can answer that question. But how awesome would it be if actually what's being live streamed isn't a CNN broadcast where someone's doing a watch party, but actually a presidential debate Web3 game where people are actually playing as Trump or Biden. Now I use that very funny, but it's just game content, right? It doesn't matter. So whatever the content is, we're going to create the events downstream. But again, I'll come back to Jeff about, how.
So even with your example, Austin, absolutely. Right. So think about a world where, well, one in the Taunt network and our Taunt Live platform right now, since what we have admins behind who are kind of manufacturing, like, for example, prediction games, like, and things like that are all leaderboard based. They could say, hey, is Austin Buddy going to say something that, say a word that the general crowd wouldn't understand, yes or no, right? And if it was yes, and you'd move up the leaderboard, you get some points. You're wrong, you'd move down the leaderboard. But even think of a couple steps down the road, which we're thinking about is, what if we took the last 30 of your interviews that you've done, right? Transcribed all of that data into a database, had an AI run through all your most common words, right, that you've actually used. And then we could get that data and ask it in such a way that it wasn't so, it had a little bit more of that fluff, like something like, well, Austin, use a word with 3 syllables or something like that. And that was automatically done to create kind of an engaging piece of content. But even taken further, you could even read that as, well, Austin, say a word that, 80% of the audience wouldn't understand, right? You could say yes or no, but they would know that because, we would know what those words are. We can reconcile that in real time because we'd have your histories around all those things. We could put actually an algorithm to, if it has 4 syllables or it's a common word based on Google searches or something like that, that would be the definition of common. But you could see where this could kind of go across the board. And this is all run automatically through AI and then streamed to the consumer or the player.
All right. I just want to clarify what you just said, because the way that I had this pictured in my head, and again, forgive me for looking at it this way, but I had it kind of pictured that, like Emmett, our producer, is sitting in the background, typing out questions in real time and putting them up on the screen. And that's not what is actually happening here, correct?
So that's the current version of the Taunt Live platform. But the next version is the iteration we just described, right? The V2 version. And again, when you start to integrate the blockchain pieces to all of this and things like that, and I think Bart's probably thinking the same way with his products, is if we have the data, we can create the content, right? And this is why I'm so bullish on getting in at the game developer level or the content creation level and understanding that, because I just gave you that example. You're just Austin, doing your interviews, right? But we could make a really cool game if we had the data, like your last 30 interviews, like what we could do. And you could predict what you're going to do, and then your core audience could have a really good time with that, right? And I think at the core, that's what we're trying to create on the Taunt network. And then hopefully you, as Austin, as a content creator, can monetize from that downstream, down the road, however you want to do that, right? Whether that's if you want to offer that as a line at the MGM, right? Is Austin going to say this word? Maybe that's a betting market, right? Or you just want to reward somebody who's engaging with your content, and if they answer 10 questions, you want to give them a cool NFT automatically, right? So those are all options in what we're trying to do and trying to build, on the Taunt side.
And again, it's good segues. And Super Streaming is trying to make that offer, whatever you decide to offer, right, of value to the customer, a pack, an NFT, a line, whatever you're deciding to offer, Super Streaming is just trying to make it easy for you to offer to a wide audience, right? It's like, if you like Whatnot and Drip right now, if you want to reach a Drip user and a Whatnot user, you have to get both your customers to download both apps. You have to do 2 separate streams, 2 separate purchases, 2 separate everything, right? Why wouldn't you just do a live auction on YouTube and then sell your stuff through Shopify, which is your primary cart anyway? And if you could offer the item, whatever you're selling, a pack of coins, an NFT, a betting link, whatever it is, if you could offer that in the same way that it comes up in a nice Whatnot app, wouldn't that be better? And that's what super streaming does, right? Is like, we make whatever you want to package and sell really easy to sell, and hopefully much more universal.
I love this so much. It's kind of like, don't mine for gold, sell the picks and the shovels, and let other people kind of figure out how they're going to use this stuff. And so, all right. So the question that is coming to my mind, that I would imagine is coming to other people's minds, is, could this be done in the way you want to do it without blockchain? Like, is that possible? Or is that like a necessary piece to what you guys are building?
So I'll speak on the Taunt side. The blockchain is absolutely necessary for all of this. So if you think about like the fragmentation across different tech stacks and getting data across, big data across millions and millions of users, and security issues and transparency issues and things like that, it's very, very difficult to get into a game developer's ecosystem without something that's really, really secure and immutable, right, to some degree. So think about if you're an EA, right? And I went to go pitch them on this idea that Taunt Network is going to do all these really cool things, but then we're control the keys of all of EA's network of users, right? Really hard pitch for them to accept. You probably no, right? But if I say, hey, here's the data that's actually going to be sent, you control what data is actually sent to the blockchain, which will be written. Everybody's going to see it, right? To some degree, you can't hack into it. It's super secure, much easier pitch from that perspective. So when you start to think about, there's that, and then there is addition, again, the low hanging fruit for us is Gamblify, right? So there is this idea of integrity, right, and things like that, where we're running, varying degrees of value, right? If go back to Austin's deal, what if his buddy told everybody what the question was going to be, right, before that answer the question in some leaderboard based thing? Now we can kind of guard against this to say, hey, we're gonna pre-publish the questions that'll come 30 minutes after the stream ends, right? And we're gonna post them on the blockchain, and on a timer it's gonna unlock, and you're gonna see all the questions we had, et cetera, right? Something like that, that'll allow, on the wagering side to be really, really effective for integrity purposes. So there's all of these things that are going there, but I think the biggest piece and the most important to the blockchain is really being able to count and distribute, these kind of the NFT pricing and or information in real time. Like there's nothing that can count like as fast as what Bart's doing in a game, and what Austin's doing in a game, and what I'm doing on a live stream, kind of getting all that data aggregated into one place really, really quickly, and then trying to offer these rewards for that engagement. And that's why I say tokenized engagement is really cool. That would be a really, really difficult thing to do in a centralized kind of locale for the scale we're looking at doing.
So that was actually my next question. Go ahead, Bart.
Oh no, and again, just to be completely honest, like the way super streaming is built, a bit more content agnostic. I mean, technically, we are helping to try to improve, let's just say, basic problems like shopping conversion, or presenting items for live auction in a stream where someone's showing it. In that case, yes. Do you technically need the blockchain for that? No, right? All that commerce is happening, without it. But I agree from a technology perspective, right? From a scaling perspective, if you are starting to try to do some of like the V2 AI and broad content, breadth of content that wants to be developed in a more automated way tied to the game, I mean, as a technology, the blockchain is something that, is almost unbeatable in terms of like the scale factor. But again, in terms of, super streaming being a very, very awesome and cool presentation layer for some of this stuff, I mean, technically it's more of, we're solving some UX problems in a way, right? So yes, could a UX problem be solved on blockchain? Yeah, kind of can, right? Just to answer your question.
Absolutely. But it also sounds like the blockchain adds a level of provable fairness to this. Whereas if you're dealing in the Gamblify world and there's a hook, right? And that, people find out, hey, it's kind of rigged in this way, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle at that point, right?
Absolutely. And there's no way to prove it, right? There's no way to prove it either way. You could say you're an honest guy, but there is no, we call it gambling commission for free-to-play prediction games, right?
Right.
You might have a prize on it. So, there's all those mitigating factors you have to think about when you're trying to build a platform and live, any type of live competition where, there is some sort of value back to the consumer.
It also, and again, from the user experience, if you're talking about a conversion improvement, it also speeds up conversion processing time, fulfillment, right? So if you're able to pass around digital assets, like right now, you can put a digital asset up in Shopify, but it's pretty much sold like a physical asset, right? So you get this, you get your shopping, then you get an email, then you get this, then you get that, whatever. It's like, wouldn't it be great if like as soon as the reward was won, it just appeared in your wallet, which is what the blockchain allows you to do. So there is some efficiencies it brings even to just like, I'll call it basic digital item fulfillment. And obviously the more and more we go these days, skins, digital items, all this, those are core economy and monetization features of these game developers.
So as you guys were sharing that, I'm, kind of just running through my head how all of this is going to work. And obviously, as you're presenting it to me, it's very attractive to content creators. It's very attractive to game developers. And this is a massive industry. Like, what is the go-to-market strategy here? What is the way to actually get to the developers prior to the inception of the game?
Great question. So I think for us, and that's why, again, it goes back to why we have Battle World, our own studio in there. It goes back to this idea of it's really hard to pitch a game developer to kind of break out of what they've always done in the past, right? No one wants to be the first person in. And that's why we do have Battle World here, right? In general. And so, Battle World will be able to show, the power of what we're trying to build with the network tools, and hopefully, developers kind of buy into that. And then in addition to that, I know, the Forever Foundation, which is our official token issuer, in general around the token, the kind of the way the tokenomics is kind of structured in general is that a significant part of that is actually, allocated towards incentivizing developers to use the tools, right? In general. And so we hope, the combination of those things are powerful enough to do it. And then of course, the lure of being able to monetize things that, they wouldn't have normally monetized in general. And then, it looks great on a spreadsheet, and, there's value add back to their players as well. Value on potentially on the customer acquisition side, all those things that all developers, but specifically Web3 developers are struggling with, right now. And, we can help with what we're building on the Taunt side.
I think for super streaming, or how we help that, right? On the go-to-market side, it's more about like what I said. It's like, hey, let's say you're a tier 2 indie game developer, right? And you might have, I'll just say 10,000 concurrent people playing your game at any given time. But if you go and you actually combed all your game content that was out there on the internet in terms of that were videos built, live streams going on, help videos, all that created by, let's say, content creators. Let's just say you had 1,000 content creators that had used your game in content at some point. So if you go multiply that out, now your game has been touched by 400,000 people. Okay, I'm just throwing out a number. So where super streaming is like, hey, let's take those 400,000 people that obviously had interest in your game, and let's turn those fans into super fans. Let's turn that fan that just watched that content about your game back into your game as a purchaser of product into your game, and as an engagement, as a person who's more engaged with your game. So if you can just rip off 1, 2, 3, 4% of the nascent fans and make them super fans, there's your go-to-market strategy, because they're already there. You didn't have to acquire them. You just had to reach them.
Earlier on in the stream, Bart, I think you had mentioned a particular game developer that basically went out and shut people down if they were live streaming. I forget the game that you
Yeah.
had mentioned specifically, but as you're talking and I'm thinking, okay, you've got these game developers that are, they're independent. They're taking a big risk by developing these games. If it's their one shot, maybe they're not going to make it. And it sounds to me like using this platform would sort of mitigate some of the risk that's involved with developing games. And so my question to you guys is, let's say this does take off. Let's say this is a real trend that's going to happen. And now you've got indie game developers who are, more confident creating games. They're taking a step out into a void that may not have accepted them as well in the past. What's that going to do potentially for the industry, for the creativity that could come about? Like, what are the potentials here?
So,
I'll
go ahead. You go first.
Let me take. I got a real good point. I'll let Jeff go from the development perspective, but my answer to you, Austin, is it's already happening, right? And the example is creators with lots of audience are now going in and creating game studios because they figured that out in reverse already.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Disrespect, own game studio. All these creators are getting together and forming alliances to build games because they've already figured that out. But they just see it from the other side because they know that they're the ones that are helping keep games interesting and alive. Okay, so that my easy answer to you is it's almost Benjamin Buttoned just on the other side. It's actually happening. Okay, so that's my quick answer from the industry perspective, and then I'll let Jeff hit it from the developer perspective.
I mean, and also just to tack onto that, that's happened on the NFT community side too, as well, right? Most of the more successful, PFP communities are transitioning to games because they have an audience, they have a rabid community in theory, and they have one half of the equation already, which is ultimately most instances probably more difficult than actually creating the game itself, right? Is getting the audience who's engaged and loyal to those pieces.
Excellent answers. All right. So next question for you. I think we're segueing very good into this. And I know that people that are watching this, in the back of their mind, they've got the Taunt token right there, right? And they're wondering, all right, how does this play a role? Because this is an amazing sounding platform, but how does the Taunt token come into play here? And where's the value accrual within that?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So again, I think, obviously the Forever Foundation is, they've launched quite a few tokens in the last, few months. They got quite a bit of experience in doing that. I think in general, how we've kind of planned in the token specifically is it's going to be utility token first in Battle World. So, it'll be a reward token. It'll be you can use it to make purchases, governance, all of those kind of normal things within the realm of Battle World. But then, like I was talking about, earlier on the calls, our goal on the network side is to get more developers using that token, incentivizing them to use that token in the same kind of fashion. We also have in the back of our heads almost like a SaaS type model to charge developers to use that rev share model, et cetera, all kind of tying back into the token itself. But just like the other projects, the Forever Foundation is kind of managing on the token side. They do have a plan around it, and we think in general it's a really smart plan, and it'll get us to our vision long term, and everybody in the ecosystem will be happy about it.
Amazing. So an unplanned question that kind of popped in my head while you were saying that, because the way that I'm hearing this is that it sounds to me like the opportunities and the limitations of this are really only limited in the minds of whoever uses these tools. And I'm wondering, in y'all's perspective, like where is the limitation here? Like where are the downsides to this?
You want to go first, Bart?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, again, I think it's for us, and what we're doing. I think one limitation, at least right now, which is an achievable limitation in the future, is just kind of education, right? And like, you got developers who are really good at what they do, right? Building really good engaging games. And then you have content creators or, people who are pushing live streams who are very good at what they're doing, which is like keeping an audience engaged with their live content. But you don't see a lot of bridging. And not only do you see a lot of bridging, you see a bit of, you don't see as much like people trying to cross over a bit. Like, again, at least right now, right? It's an education thing. And the reason is it's because I'm good at what I do, and I like my audiences is what it is, and that's what I do. And a game developer is like, I just like making games, right? And they kind of think, if I make a good game, to Jeff's point, you're going to hit that home run, you're going to get that, Pal World, whatever, strike a lightning in the bottle and get your, 100,000 purchases on Steam in one go. And in the reality is, you got to work a bit harder than that. And the world is a bit more transactional, and it's a bit more kind of, broader. It's all distribution. So educating how a game developer can think about developing a game, knowing that it's just as the gameplay in the game is just important as how someone takes that gameplay and then surfaces it outside the game. If they just learn that bit, the utility of this skyrockets through the roof. That education kind of level is made. So that's kind of like the first point. The second point is just, I think it's basic economics, right? Like, I come from the online betting background, right? It's like, you knew exactly what the LTV of every customer that you acquired is, right? You knew it to the T. If they clicked on a Facebook link from the UK in this city and placed 2 bets on Manchester United, we had a model that would say, probably they're going to make you X over the lifetime. But that kind of, I'll call it a bit more data commercialization, thought of monetization, does not happen at this game level. It's like spray and pray. We're going to build it. We're going to hope for the home run. And so the more that information can be serviced, and that people think that way, and it's not fun, it's not exciting, it's not that creative, but it's damn well valuable, and it will make a better product, right? Because you'll be able to sustain it for longer. You'll be able to version it out. Like, I know Among Us is probably dying they didn't actually make Among Us 2, because they didn't monetize when they had a chance. And that's my opinion, right? And then it flashed in the pants. And yeah, it's still a popular game, but they can never go back. Like, it can never be a franchise. But they had a chance for it to be a franchise. And I again, for all the Among Us fans who are listening, like, I'm sorry, but they just damn well blew it. They actually came out and said, we're not going to change anything. Like, literally made a statement not to try to take advantage of it, which the commercial mind in me just thinks that's silly.
I love your energy, Bart. Man, good to have an interview with you, man.
Hey,
Jeff.
Hey, Jeff told me there was energy to be brought, so
That's what I'm saying.
Anyway,
So,
sorry, there you go.
Jeff, over to you. Are there limitations from your perspective? Like, what are obviously we've talked about the low hanging fruit, but where are the, if we were to SWOT this thing, SWOT analysis, where are the opportunities, where are the threats?
Yeah. So for me, it's more on the tactical level, because it is such a newer idea, and it's the idea of it so great, but the execution so fragile to some degree, right? So for me, and again, this is why I love having our own game studio as kind of first in, so we can kind of develop some best practices and things like that. But the key thing for me is, you don't necessarily have to shove interactivity down people's throats if they don't want it, right? If they want to just passively watch a podcast or a football game or whatever, that's completely fine. What Bart and I are developing are for the people who want a little bit more, right? They want a little bit more action or whatnot. And so I think from a tactical level, one of the bigger risks is, let's just say Taunt Network, gets 5 or 6, top Web3 developers to, use the tools. And we say, hey guys, have at it, go great, here you go, make whatever you want for the streams. And they just become way too aggressive with it, meaning like the pacing isn't right. Like, it's just, it's doing too much when it needs to just tone down. And from a technical level, then what ends up happening, it turns off the developer, right? If they don't really understand how to manage kind of the flow of those feature sets and things like that, and then they're like, oh, well, nobody likes it, then I just give up, right? that's the piece where, I do think it's very, very important that where Battle World can actually play a vital part, other than it being its own standalone game, is really showing developers on how to do this right and really set those best practices going in at scale, because that is a significant risk. If 5 out of 5 developers just throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and they all strike out, well, they're telling all their buddies, and we really don't have any use cases for the network at that point. So it's really that first group that comes in, I think, is going to be really important to really curate that group, and then also make sure that they're doing things the right way, and we give them all the tools to be successful.
And Jeff just made me think of something there, Austin, when he was talking. It's like, an example I'd give you is think of if Mr. Beast now knew what he knew now when he started out, how many million subscribers he had. And it's kind of what Jeff's saying. It's like Mr. Beast learned along the way how to produce really good content in a live as a live streamer. And what Taunt can bring is a lot of that best practice, the experimentation, some of that hard knocks learning and guidance, so that there's a less chance they're going to strike out, and you're giving them a head start, right? And so
Absolutely.
If you think of it that way, and Jeff, I mean, I just thought of that as you were talking. It's like giving someone a bit of insight into something, but that normally just takes a lot of trial and error. But if you could shortcut it just a bit, you're going to be in a better spot.
Yeah, you de-risk them significantly.
Yeah.
Boom. Great answer to that, guys. I know I kind of put you on the spot with that one. So we're running towards the end, but I do see a question over here, and maybe we need a little bit more clarification just real quick. And it's from a guy named Adam. I apologize, Bart. I'm going to flash this on the screen. It's going to cover your face almost completely.
No,
so I'm
it's
sorry
fine.
about that. Right? So I'm trying to understand how super streaming and Taunt, I know we talked about this, will leverage the DevX blockchain, because as far as I understand, there's no need for the product to be on the blockchain. And I know that we did answer that real specifically, but can we go back and give just a quick synopsis?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just for clarification purposes, the Taunt network will use the Devve blockchain as its main blockchain. So all of the data sets, all the rewards, all of our tokens, all of that will be on Devve as our main. Now, we'll also be on other blockchains as well, but the central repository of data, and everybody will come back around to the Devve chain eventually, right? Reconciliation and all of that stuff. So, again, the only blockchain right now in the world that even has a chance to do that, right? As that central repository. So we will, that is going to be our use case. Our partnership with Super Streaming specifically really is to start to use what we're building on the Devve blockchain and to try some things out, right? Through their extension and things like that. So potentially get some Taunt utility within Super Streaming, potentially use some of our Web3 contracts and things like that to offer NFTs as pricing, to do some light touches there. We're going to figure out what's going to work for those audiences. But ultimately, whatever we get integrated into Super Streaming will always tie back to Devve, because that is our main.
Yeah.
That is going to be our main.
We're the downstream. So if there's really good game content, really good reward programs, really good utility that is developed leveraging Taunt and blockchain, we can use it, right? If they're not developed, we can't do anything with it because it doesn't exist. So we are like we're kind of the wedge. Like, we're downstream. Once that content is there and enabled and all the hooks are there, then we can help, like I was saying, is like reach that base fan and get more people kind of using it. So we're kind of just gas, but if the blockchain isn't used, there's nothing to pour it on.
Let's go. I love a good gas fire analogy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you so much. So we had a drawing that we were going to do, and let me go ahead and pull that up. We're going to be giving away a mythical NFT warrior and a Genesis Skull Pass. So here we go. The winner is... Can't be me. If it's me, we'll do it again. The real Randy Chavez, my friend. Yeah. So do me a favor, should they just DM you on Twitter? Is that okay, Jeff?
Absolutely. That's fine.
All right. DM them on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've tuned in today, thank you very much. If you like this content, do me a favor, like the channel, subscribe to it, like the video, then subscribe to the channel. We'll get that down one of these days. Thank you all for tuning in. My name's Austin with Devve. Joining me today is Jeff and Bart, and we'll catch you guys on the next live stream. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Austin. See you guys.
Take care.
Hope you guys see you soon.